Hello there, and a very warm welcome to Chazingdra Chats, the show where we take a stroll through the life stories of people in the Pokemon community, discovering the 6 Pokemon on their dream team along the way. I'm Charlie Merriman, merry by name, merry by nature. Otherwise known as Chazingdra, a host and commentator for the Pokemon Video Game Championship Series and a content creator. This week, I very much hope that my guest and I can brighten your day, as always, because I am honoured to be joined by the wonderful Pokemon GO commentator, Nick Livezey, otherwise known as AlphaFeeb. Nick, thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, it's a pleasure. I'm excited to be here to talk you through, what my life's been and how Pokemon has, interacted with it.
So, Nick and I met very briefly in person at EUIC, and by very briefly, I mean hi, and that was it. But we also have a strange connection in that medical condition I have, I take a certain medicine for that, which is created by the company that Nick works with. And we discovered this back in the autumn last year. It's really fantastic to be able to have you on the show right now.
Yeah, it was such a interesting happenstance. I think you had mentioned it in like a Discord chat. I saw it there and I was like, oh, what a strange coincidence. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the people that know me know that in addition to a Pokemon professor, I am also a doctor. I have a doctorate degree, so that I like to make jokes about that, but I don't actually go around saying that I'm a doctor.
You can lose the air quotes. We can just we can just roll with it. So yeah, Nick. So you gave a little teaser there, but for anyone who's not so familiar with you, can you give a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Nick, go by AlphaFeeb. I have been a caster for the past 2 years for Go. Before that, I did a little bit of streaming. I was actually a fairly prolific judge in the grassroots scene. Pretty decent competitor, if I say so myself. I was like top 100 in the grassroots leaderboard the first year, but I've kind of fallen off, as the kids say. I still like to compete every once in a while. Like I was at EUIC. I think my only other event this year on the like regional or national level was Pittsburgh. So like casting takes up a lot of my time. And then my 9 to 5, I'm an analytical chemist, and I spend a lot of my times looking at instruments that help me figure out if drugs are pure.
Right. Yeah, that sounds very intense, and it sounds like you need a lot of specialist knowledge for that. So I salute you. Okay, then, Nick. Time to take a bit of a deeper dive into your life story and learn the 6 Pokemon that you're choosing for your dream team. Thank you for your openness with what you're sharing, as always. So I believe we're starting off appropriately with your childhood and the first Pokemon games you played, as well as your first Pokemon cards.
Yeah, I don't actually recall whether I interacted with the trading card game or the video game first. I remember my first Pokemon card. It was given to me by my brother. It was a Ponyta. A little bit of a spoiler. It actually does not make my team of 6, but
Okay.
that's okay. And he had like collected a bunch of cards with his like middle school friends, and I was like, an elementary school kid. I wanted one. I was like, can I have one? And he just gave me a Ponyta. I ended up collecting a large amount of cards. My siblings both fell out of love with Pokemon a little bit faster than I did, as kids at least, and they ended up giving me all their cards, so I have a huge collection still. It's with my parents. I don't actually have it on me, but I have probably every single Pokemon from Generation 1, at least a couple of cards of them, and maybe going into Generation 2. And then for the video game, we all collectively shared a singular Game Boy, and that meant we passed it around. And for games that like had a singular save file like Pokemon, it meant that we had to share it. Thankfully, I was also the one who like had the longest attention span for video games, so I was usually the one who was in control, which is funny because I was also the youngest. So like not necessarily what you would expect, but maybe if you like expect the youngest child to be the spoiled brat, then maybe. I don't know. I kind of try to own that like youngest child thing a little bit, but I also try not to actually be a spoiled brat. So
I think we gotta unpack that a little bit more.
oh no, actually back then I was probably a little bit of a brat, but like I'm talking more like middle school, high school. I like tried to like understand it a little bit better, be mature about it, like, you
Mm,
know, grow out of it as well.
sure.
But yeah, so I played blue and yellow and gold. Those are my first three games. I loved yellow a lot because, having the Pikachu walking around behind you. Did you play yellow at all?
I didn't play yellow actually. No, I was blue.
Um, so there was the Pikachu that you got as your starter. So instead of going to Professor Oak and there being three choices, there were zero choices. It was like the anime where you showed up, woke up late or whatever, and showed up late, and all three of the original starters were chosen. So you were given Pikachu, this like Rapscallion Pokemon that didn't treat trainers well, and it like started off refusing to go in its Pokeball, so it would always follow you, and you could face it and talk to it, and it would show you its like happiness level. Yellow was great. I loved that game. You eventually got the ability to get all three starters, and I always thought it was really cool as a kid that you could get all three starters in yellow, and that was a lot of fun. So I liked yellow a lot, and then I played gold. Um, I I listened to your podcast with Jake, and you two have remembered so much more about that game than I do. I think you talked about like getting to the top of Mount Silver and finding yourself, and I remember that, but I would not have been able to call out like Mount Silver as being the name of the mountain there. I do remember like eventually finding yourself from generations 1 and 2, and like that being like, oh, and yeah, I was similarly into gold, played through both the main portion of the game and the after game. And it was actually after gold that I dropped Pokemon for a long time. I didn't play Gens 3 through all the way to Sword and Shield, or technically Let's Go. I played, and that was right before Sword and Shield.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a large gap of not playing the main series games.
And I believe we're going to dive into that large gap in just a moment's time. But you say, yeah, finding yourself at the top of Mount Silver, as in yourself from Generation 1. But also, I like to think that players that age found themselves, through through playing the game. Definitely a soul-searching, long old journey in Gold and Silver, and love it. So cool as well that you remember your very first Pokemon card with Ponyta. But intrigued that Ponyta doesn't make the team. So now is a great opportunity to ask you, what is the first Pokemon on your dream team? So the idea here isn't for Nick to build the best competitive team in any way. It's just Pokemon that are special to him in some way, and I have no idea what he's chosen. He's chosen them in advance. So hit us, Nick. What's the first Pokemon on your team?
The first Pokemon's no surprise to anyone who knows me. It's my favorite Pokemon. It has been my favorite Pokemon for a long time, and embarrassingly enough, I don't think I actually have had it in the main series games ever, because it is a trade evolution, and it is Gengar. I love, I just like the style of Gengar. I like the fact that he's a trickster. Like, it seems like a lot of fun, and has been my favorite since Generation 1.
So you said you've never actually been able to own Gengar in the main series because it requires that trade. So there weren't even friends you could trade with at school or anything like that?
So when I played Blue, I was probably too young to understand how to evolve Haunter into Gengar. I definitely had a Haunter, but I was not sure how to get a Gengar, and I didn't realize that you had to trade it. I have like some vague memories of like maybe eventually learning that's how you get like Machamp and Alakazam. So I think maybe eventually I would have like been able to trade friends. I did have friends who played the game. I didn't go, around the block battling different people like Jake did, but like I think I probably did a few like connection battles. You had to have like a physical cable between the Game Boys in order to battle, which like I did have one of those. I think I used it to trade sometimes as well. But I don't have a strong memory of like ever having a Gengar, so to me that means I probably didn't have one.
Yeah. As a Pokemon Go player as well, connecting phones by cable, that must be completely unfathomable, using the Wi-Fi that we have these days. But Yeah, well, is there a particular reason why Gengar is a favorite? You said you vibe with it, you like its trickster. Is it the fact that it's ghost and poison as well? Do you connect with that typing in any way?
Ghost, yes. Ghost is my favorite typing. But poison, not as much. I don't. I don't know. I try to not make poisons in my work, so I don't think I have a strong connection to a lot of poison types, but ghost types, yes, definitely.
You're right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Gengar joins the dream team. Fantastic. So going from there, you teed us up for this before. Exploring other games from the launchpad of Pokemon.
Yeah. So like I said, I was the most interested in video games of my family. We did actually. This is not on the script, but this is going way back. We had a PlayStation 1, and we had this like long uh, boomerang shaped almost dock where you could plug in multiple controllers, and we had 5 controllers, so we could play 5 people on a PlayStation 1, which is like, to me, is like unheard of crazy. Like, how could the first generation video game console handle that many inputs? That like blows my mind now, even though I know we did it.
Yeah.
We play this game called Bomberman. We'd always play it like as a group of 5. I like that game a lot. Other video games I've played, like I got really into Halo. My cousin had an Xbox when I was like a middle schooler. Went over to his place. We played Halo over there. Halo 2, Halo 3 came out. I eventually got my own Xbox, started playing Xbox Live, got really obsessed with them, honestly. Modern Warfare 2, when it came out, was a ton of fun. And I also, as you might have guessed, Charlie, based on a lot of the questions that I was asked, I also got into RuneScape as a middle schooler. I don't actually know if you've played RuneScape. It is a British game, though, so maybe.
So I didn't know it was British. I do know it was a massive thing years and years ago, but it's not something I ever dabbled in, actually. No. So I'm excited to get your take on it.
Yeah, so, I mean, for everyone who doesn't know, it's like a point and click MMORPG, the very akin to like World of Warcraft, but a lot simpler. The game mechanics are all controlled really through your mouse. So you click on something to attack it, you click on a spell, and then click on a monster to use it. And it's actually, I think it makes a ton of sense why I got into RuneScape as well as Pokemon Go. They're very similar games in their like basic gameplay loops, where you have to grind in order to get a resource. In Pokemon Go, that resource is dust in order to power up your Pokemon. But in RuneScape, that resource is either resources that you're gathering or XP to like get your levels up. And it's like kind of like an internet meme, like number go up equals dopamine. And it's so true of both games. Like, you like to set in like, I guess a more analytical way to look at it is like, you set yourself mini goals and you accomplish those goals, and you feel rewarded by accomplishing those goals. And I think that kind of structure of goal setting and goal completion is a lot of fun within video games, and it's one of the things that I think drives me to video games, is that cycle. And I enjoy those like gameplay loops a lot.
That's really interesting insight into the psyche, I think, of you as a video game player. And then, so in RuneScape, first of all, it's interesting to hear that it's felt like you laid the foundation of Pokemon at a young age, then you laid the foundation of RuneScape at a young age, and then later on, Pokemon Go sort of meets the two. It's interesting to hear that sort of RuneScape paved the way for that. But also, so in Pokemon Go, obviously, you have more of an idea of what you're grinding towards. In RuneScape, what are you building towards there? What are you saving up your resources for in RuneScape?
So it could be going to kill a boss. It could be going to do like a raid. A raid's like a self-contained set of like puzzles or bosses that you have to go through in order to get this big reward at the end. It could be my one of my friends, Charles, aka CCO, Go Live. Sorry, that was a bit of an internet meme for him. He's a streamer and he doesn't like going live, so people always tell him to go live. He is working on getting all of his levels to 99, which is called maxing.
Oh.
So maxing out your total level, and he is currently working on that, and like that is another thing that you can work towards. There's quests that you can complete in the game, and that's actually like a mid to early late game goal, is to finish all the quests. The end game stuff is like the raids, certain bosses you can only do once you have enough gear. Getting gear is another frequent goal. But let me actually back up a little bit to like describe how I got back into RuneScape. Because I've played it various times. Like I played a lot as a kid. That was like the classic RuneScape, back when we were all teenagers. I actually got into it a little bit in college, end of college into early grad school, stopped again. And then I got into it most recently because of Pokemon Go, which is so funny. So RuneScape came out with a game mode called Group Iron Man. So to describe that, it's easier to describe what Iron Man is. It's a game mode where you don't trade other people and you have to collect all your resources yourself. So typically in the game, you like collect resources, sell them for gold, buy other resources. That's like a pretty typical MMO gameplay style. In Iron Man, you do everything yourself. So if you need 1,000 vials, you have to buy those 1,000 vials yourself from a like in-game shop. You can't buy them off of the trade or the like player market. And then Group Iron Man is that same game mode, except you have maybe a set of 5 people that you can trade in between each other, but you can't trade outside of the group. And it kind of, in a sense, it rebuilds the microcosm of like being a young kid, like having friends and like playing a game together again as adults. So I actually started again because I'm playing with 4 other people in a group Iron Man setting. Charles is one of them. You know, a third member, Inadequence. He is another of the group Iron Man folk. His friend Jeremy and our friend Ross. So that makes us 5, and we spend a lot of time like playing together. But we all met through Pokemon Go, which is, it's kind of like a funny, like a snake eating a snake. It like one thing is led to another, and it's kind of like circular how it's worked. How like Pokemon Go and RuneScape are both similar games, but like one has led me into another, which has led me back into the first. It's a bit funny.
Yeah. Well, it's such a vibrant community we're a part of, and it's all about the people that we're playing with that make it all so enjoyable. So you again, before we get into grad school that you mentioned just then, I think it's time for Gengar to have a buddy on your dream team. Who's going to be the second Pokemon joining it?
So you're asking about types. So my favorite type is Ghost. My second favorite type is Dark. And you know, the Ghost and Dark type Sableye would be a pretty solid Pokemon to add to my team. However, my second favorite Pokemon is a pure Dark type, and it is Umbreon from Generation 2, which also, for those who pay attention to the Pokemon Go competitive scene, is not a surprise, because extremely frequently on my teams of 6, I will bring Umbreon, because Umbreon's also incredibly competitive in the Pokemon Go scene.
I see. And why is that?
So it's incredibly competitive because it is incredibly bulky. It has a great stat distribution in order to take a lot of hits. Dark typing's pretty solid. It hits a lot of things for neutral. I think that's across the games. I think normal types are very common in Go, and they will very frequently use Ghost type fast attacks. Lickitung is the Pokemon I'm looking at. So Umbreon's a really great wall to that Pokemon. in Go. Resisting Ghost is really, really nice. Psychic's not a super common offensive typing in Go, but you know, our old King of the Fighters Metacham, which is like not the King of the Fighters anymore. Right now, it's Annihilate. It used to, well, actually, both Annihilate and Metacham take neutral damage from Dark because of their subtyping. So, in that sense, Umbreon shores up its fighting weakness in certain matchups because Dark is such a solid neutral typing in Go.
That was very well explained. Thank you for that. As someone from the VG scene, it's always interesting to hear the insight of people from other games. So, Umbreon is your second favorite Pokemon. You also like Dark types. So, yeah, I guess now the natural question is, why is Umbreon your second favorite Pokemon?
So I have a lot of fondness for Gens 1 and 2 because they are the games that I played as a kid. Evolutions, I think, in general, are really interesting. And I like the Gen 2 evolutions a little bit more than the Gen 1s. Espeon and Umbreon are cool. Out of the two, I think maybe at different times of my life, I liked Umbreon a little more than Espeon. I mean, Espeon's also really well designed, but Umbreon's sleek. The shiny variant's really nice. I love the color blue. It's my favorite color. And I don't know, black and blue, it looks sleek. Black and yellow, it also looks sleek. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's well designed. It looks good. It's good in competitive Go, which I think really helped, for me at least in the most recent years, push Umbreon above Espeon for me in terms of like which Gen 2 evolution I like the most.
I see. Yeah, understandable. Favorite color's blue. That's good to know. We'll see if that is borne out by any of your future Pokemon picks. But before we get into those, let's move on to grad school then.
Yeah. So I first got into chemistry in like high school and middle school, but you know, went to college. I was pretty sure I wanted to be a chemistry major when I went in. I was like thinking about chemistry, computer science, which are kind of slightly different. Those are my like main two interests coming out of high school. Going into undergrad, I enjoyed my chemistry classes. I ended up doing some research there. Very different from the work I do now. For any chemist nerds out there, I did bioinorganic chemistry, or not even bioinorganic. I did just pure inorganic chemistry. I was working with a big glass. It's called a manifold, but you can just envision it as just something big in glass and cylindrical, and it would be pulled under complete vacuum, so all of the air and oxygen pulled out of it, and I would connect things to it to do air-free chemistry, certain reactions, and what really drew me to inorganic chemistry was the vibrant colors. Things that are metallic, things that have metals in them are usually very colorful. I think the most easy to understand would be rust. You know, rust is very red, right? That's iron that has been oxidized to be a different color. And that's common amongst all of the different elements of the periodic table. My favorite element, titanium, is one that I worked with a lot in undergrad. I actually had a compound that I got a crystal of, and I was able to get a crystal structure, which is something you do in chemistry. You can shoot like X-rays at compounds and try to determine their atomic structure, like how each of the atoms are connected to each other. But you require something that's like incredibly pure and crystalline in order to do so. So like growing crystals in science can be a little bit tricky. But I managed to do it for one of the compounds I was working with. It was a dark blue green, and that was that meant a lot to me to be able to get a crystal structure. It's not very common for an undergrad to be able to do the work that is required to get one. Some other compounds I worked with that included titanium were like bright blue, like a baby blue, like the Kanto sign behind you, like that exact color, and a vibrant purple as well. And the different colors that you can create in inorganic chemistry is really interesting to me, but also it's not as, you can make pretty colors, but that doesn't actually like do anything. It doesn't like help people, or it doesn't solve any problems. But you know, I took that kind of base understanding of inorganic chemistry, and in grad school, that's when I started doing bioinorganics. So taking the foundational understanding of inorganic chemistry and applying it to biological problems, which apply to people. So my grad work, I started on a project working with small molecules called siderophores. It's a large word. All it means is iron chelator. So the molecules are produced by bacteria inside of humans in order to try to steal our iron, because they need iron to grow. So they'll produce it, secrete it into our body, grab the iron, and it'll come back inside the bacteria. So they'll have stolen our iron. And we were trying to utilize those molecules in order to do different testings or create different ways of attacking bacteria. So you can envision, if you have this molecule that the bacteria wants to take in that it thinks it made, if you tag on something that can like be a bright light, or for those of you who are sciencey, a fluorophore, so something that you shoot with light and it shines light out as well, you could detect bacteria. So we had a couple of projects in bacterial detection. If you take that same compound and you attach on a antibiotic, you could have a very directed antibiotic towards those bacteria, and you could create a potentially more effective antibiotic. And that was part of the projects that I worked on as well. And those are all really difficult, and it comes with the struggle of grad school. You can have like really great ideas, but sometimes they just don't pan out, or sometimes they're a little too complex, and maybe you don't have all the tools necessary to actually take them from start to finish. So I worked on those projects a lot. They weren't extremely successful. They were great ideas, but what I ended up writing my thesis on was a wildly different subject, which I think is really funny. So the final work that I ended up doing was trying to create a prodrug for epinephrine. So this kind of is like kind of how I phased in a little bit into pharma in a sense. So a prodrug is a drug that has been chemically modified to be slightly different, and then once it goes inside the body, that chemical modification is taken off naturally by the body and it becomes the drug inside the body. So pro means like before drug. So it's something that once it goes inside your body, it becomes a drug. I was trying to do that for epinephrine, which is what is in the shots that people take when they have anaphylactic shock, like EpiPens. And I was trying to actually use a inorganic molecule, gallium, to try to help stabilize epinephrine, because epinephrine, at certain pHs, so pHs like acidic or basic, it has to be really acidic in order to be stable, and it can't be at high temperatures. So we were trying to see if by making a prodrug of epinephrine, we could try to counteract those two problems of epinephrine and EpiPens.
That's fascinating. What were the results? Were you able to?
Yes, fairly successfully. It became a little bit difficult. There were a lot of challenges in terms of actually correctly studying that effectiveness. I ended up doing a bunch of what are called forced degradation studies. So I'd have epinephrine in a vial. I'd put it in like a water bath at 40. This is really funny. 40 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Celsius. And what's funny about it is that my chemistry brain works in Celsius, but my outdoors brain works in Fahrenheit. So like I will understand certain things in terms of Celsius, but if you said, "Oh, it's like 17 degrees Celsius outside," I have like an okay understanding of what you meant in Fahrenheit. But like, it's so strange being a scientist in the U.S. and having to know different sets of numbers for different aspects of your life.
Yeah, you should come to the UK. Just dealing in Celsius the whole time. All good.
It would make life a little bit easier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow. Thanks so much for that insight there. The fact that you have a favorite element as well in titanium, that's I think that's really cool too. Is that because of that story of you working with that element and what you were to get out of it? Yeah.
I'm like, sometimes I can be pretty decisive. Sometimes I struggle a little bit, and like there are so many elements, so I like having a special connection to one of them, and it makes having like because like you work as a chemist and people are going to ask you, "Oh, what's your favorite element?"
See, yeah.
Like for other things I'm just like, I don't know. God, what was asked before? It's like, oh, it's like if someone asks you, "Well, what's your favorite day of the week?" Like, okay, sure, most people are going to say Friday because it's the end of the work week, but like if the work week didn't exist, then who knows what people would say.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, and doing experiments in zero oxygen conditions as well. Oh, incredible.
It's a bit of a struggle because the people I interact with in my 9 to 5 are all like trained chemists. So I don't ever have to explain anything when I talk to them. But like when I go to talk to people who aren't scientists, I have to really make sure that I'm explaining everything. That you have to put it in layman's terms. And it's strange for me, at least, because I want to make sure that I'm not over explaining, because I don't want to I don't want to like come off like I'm talking down to someone.
Do you know what an element is? Well, no, I thought you explained it really well. And now it's time to pivot back to Pokemon. Let's see who's going to join Gengar and Umbreon on your dream team.
Yeah, so during grad school, actually, I had a friend group, and we participated in like a draft of Pokemon in the video game, not actually Go. And we did, the typical, I think it wasn't 2v2s, it was 1v1s against each other. And we drafted our teams of 6, and this Pokemon was on my team of 6, and it had a very unique move called Tail Glow. And for those of you who don't do the video game, Tail Glow raises your special attack by 3 stages. So it was my setup sweeper, and I loved this Pokemon. And it's actually not even in Go yet, so I'm excited for it to be in Go at some point. It is Manaphy.
Manaphy. Very,
which
very
ties
cool.
in with the color blue.
Yes, there we go. I wondered, is it going to be Volbeat? But no, you went down the Manaphy route. Okay. Yeah, so a special connection to that Pokemon from that experience. Very nice. Okay. So we got Ghost Poison, we got Dark, and we got Water so far on your team. I love how they complement each other as well. But I guess both Gengar and Umbreon are a little bit cheeky, but Manaphy is just pure joy. Pure bliss.
Yeah.
So great. That's a lovely trio you've got there. All right. So now building a Go community, and then the introduction of PvP and grassroots tournaments.
Yeah. So Pokemon Go came out the first summer of my grad school, and I remember my grad group, the group that I was working with for the science and research I was doing, we would be part of a larger set of people that would go on a canoeing trip. And this was like maybe a week after the game came out. We did this canoeing trip. It was a great day. I afterwards on the car ride back to Minneapolis, because I did my grad work at the University of Minnesota. I open up the game. I have an egg hatch, and boom, it's Pikachu. And I like freak out because it's my first Pikachu in the entire game, and it's like a week into the game. So like all I have are Pidgeys and Caterpies at this point, you know. Um, uh, I honestly, similar to like video games in high school, I got like pretty addicted to Pokemon Go. I loved playing that game. I loved like going out and going on raids, trying to, you know, beat the raid bosses, capture the legendaries, trying to get those legendaries with great stats. I raided a lot in grad school, and this meant that I saw a lot of people in the community. And oddly enough, right about the same time, Discord started being a thing. It's so strange being in 2024. Discord's been around. It's so weird to say this. It's been a large part of my life for the past 10 years. But like Discord was starting to be a thing back then, and we formed a Discord community so that people could, you know, tell each other when they were going to show up to raids. And I was like a moderator of this group because I was very active. I really enjoyed making sure, you know, everyone caught the Pokemon that they were going to raid. Everyone like knew which berries to use in order to have the best chance of catching it. You know, using a curveball throw instead of a straight throw increases your chances of catching it. There's like a lot of different tips and tricks that were formed by people just sharing knowledge with each other and like making sure everyone was in the Discord so they knew like how to share that information was great. And Minneapolis was in a bit of a weird spot because there was this really big Discord server that was moderated by someone that probably shouldn't have been moderating it because they were a little inflexible. And that's not great for a growing community. You want to have someone that's flexible, that can like, you know, move with the punches. And I feel like I'm using that phrase wrong. It's something with the punches.
Roll with the punches, I think.
Roll with the punches. There we go.
We can just
close. Rolling is a type of movement.
Yeah, we just coin a new phrase, whatever. Move with the kicks. We'll roll with the punches. We'll jibe with the jabs. Keep going.
So like, what ended up happening, because that big server that was supposed to cover all of Minneapolis wasn't able to accommodate the growth, what ended up happening is Minneapolis splintered. The Discord community splintered into small subsections. So there's like one for the main campus of the University of Minnesota. There was one for the St. Paul campus of the University of Minnesota. There was one for like Nokomis Lake. There's one for all these other different neighborhoods, downtown, Marcy Holmes, which is where I was living at the time. And that wasn't great for like overall community. And one of the things that I ended up setting up was a server that hosted links to each of these like different smaller local servers so that people could always stay in touch and like in touch with the community, no matter where they were traveling. Like, oh, I'm spending the week at Nokomis Lake, then I want to do a raid there. You know, I can find the community with this large, it was called the Minnesota Hub, because that's all it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a place where people go to find the place that they really want to go, and being able to interact with the community in that way. And I think like that, and then the local University of Minnesota Discord, where I was maybe a little more active in like trying to set up raids, etc., were a big part of like my introduction to Go in terms of trying to help the community grow and support each other in terms of, you know, the things that they want to do in the game. Then Niantic hit us with PvP like 2 years in, and that really shook everything up. And Go in the first 4 years before PvP came out, I forget the exact timeline, was a very local game. But PvP, because you could do it with people all over the world, blew it up. It became like, obviously it was like a global phenomenon, but like PvP scene became a global thing. And I forget the exact year that PvP came out. The feature launched in like November or maybe October, and then in December, our grassroots format established itself, and that started off slow, but it grew into this huge thing. Um, the basic format of it was there was this organization that would set up a tournament structure, but also a tournament meta where certain types of Pokemon or certain Pokemon would be allowed. So I think the first meta was like maybe ground, steel, fighting. One other, I'm forgetting. This is forever ago, and they would name a specific cup, like Kingdom Cup, etc. And you would have local tournaments that would show up, but there were also certain Discord groups where you could build up friendship, because at the time you had to be like Ultra Friends, which is 90 days of interaction in order to battle someone remotely. So you'd have these groups where people would like work on friendship so that they could battle each other remotely, and then they would host these tournaments within a small community as well. And that also like made the PvP scene boom in size, and people were like theory crafting and like team building and scrimming across the globe, and it was a huge thing for like 2 years at the very least. It was like massive, and people were so excited, especially because like the end of the season would be like the final like it was called the Worlds Tournament, but it was before the competitive scene adopted Go, and that was always like a big tournament people were hyped about. People were like really trying to qualify for it, and it was a lot of fun. And I helped my local community host these tournaments. I helped adjudicate any issues that came up between players. And then I also started doing that in a lot of these smaller online communities as well. So like I went from like helping people to raid to helping people host PvP tournaments. And I ended up doing this for like one of the larger grassroots tournaments, and I kind of became the head ref of that one. There was like the grassroots place that hosted and like created the metas, and there was another one that was kind of underneath it that was the location where they were like a lot of the tournaments were being held in a sense. And I was in that smaller organization, like the head judge within there, and responsible for like making sure all the calls that we were making were correct.
I see. Wow. So you really very swiftly went from enjoying the game to well, I guess helping others enjoy the game and coming up with a structure for everyone to enjoy it.
Yeah. I guess even in the raids, I felt like helping other people's. I was able to do that, but on a different level and in a different way. Like PvP opened up a competitive way for us to play the game, which was really great. Because I'm a very competitive person by nature, and having these small local competitions where you'd like have like a couple of people who are like the best in the local area competing against each other, and you're like, oh, who's gonna win this tournament, who's gonna win the next tournament, who's gonna come out on top, like all those little things were a lot of fun. And to also extend it to like larger groups of people, like people in California, and there are a lot of people in the Midwest in one of the groups that I played in, but also like literally globally. We had one person from India, like a couple of people in Europe, like literally the entire globe in this like 20-person Discord group that would set up their own small tournaments.
That's so cool. And of course, helping other people understand the game translates into the casting that you do now. But before we get on to all of that, let's see who's going to join the 3 that you've got in your team so far. So It's Gengar, Umbreon, and Manaphy. Who's going to be number 4?
Yeah, so it is actually leads really well into the next topic, because I wouldn't say that I'm like famous for doing this, but one of the first interactions in the public eye that I had for Pokemon Go was the King IV challenge, which was a challenge that was actually given to that small 20-person global like PvP group. And the challenge was win 15 games in a row with a Ultra League team. So for those who don't play Pokemon Go PvP, that's under 2,500 CP. Or combat power, and if you did that, you were able to get on this person's friend list. And King's like kind of a celebrity within the Go scene. He was a very early content creator. He's now like still doing content creation. He still streams, but he's focused a lot of his efforts on judging now. That's kind of what his main interaction with the community, I would say, is through judging. And I was able to successfully do this challenge, and 15 wins in a row is no easy task. And funnily enough, one of my opponents was King himself, which is so funny. We like matched on the ladder. I saw it was him. I was like 12 or 13 into my win streak. I was freaking out. And the team consists of Lapras, Gallade, and the Pokemon that I'm added into my team, Ampharos. Which I believe I'm actually the second person to add that Pokemon to my team.
That's right, yeah. You will have seen Jake adding Ampharos to his team as well, Jake Sprague from Pokemon Unite. So, how come then Ampharos rather than Gallade and Lapras?
Gen 2, I really liked Mareep. Beep beep Mareep. Shout out to some of the VG casters. I like it, it's like a fluffy cloud. I think it's like a very pretty Pokemon. And then the evolution to Flaffy and to Ampharos, I just have a lot of memories with the Pokemon, and it was probably one of the Pokemon on my team of 6 that made it to the Elite Four in Gen 2. So I feel like that is more than enough reason for it to be on my team of 6 here.
Yeah, fair enough. Great. Well, that's a nice, as you say, timely connection to your 4th Pokemon there, Ampharos. And again, continuing the diversity of types in your Dream Team so far. So we'll see if that continues. But now we're going to go into the COVID era and Go Battle League streaming, and then taking first steps into casting as well.
Yeah, so PvP in Go, when it first came out, was very restricted in what you could do. There was no online ladder. You could battle someone in person if you like scanned a QR code, or you could become ultra friends with someone, which is 90 days of interaction before you can do that. So that's like a lot of effort in order to try to battle someone. That all changed with the introduction of Go Battle League. Go Battle League was the online ladder. Thankfully, this has changed, but when it first came out, you had to walk, I think, 5 kilometers in order to do 5 battles, which, like, 5 kilometers is not too far, but if you want to get in 25 battles, you have to be walking for, like, 4 hours or something, like, really long. So, a little bit restrictive, but then COVID happened, and they made alterations to the games because, you don't want to force people to go out to walk 5 kilometers in the middle of the beginning of a pandemic, when we're like still trying to figure out what like the pandemic means to the global community. So they cut the walking requirement. And when they did, that's actually when the Twitch scene for Pokemon Go exploded and became a thing. I was one of the earlier people to start streaming on Twitch. Maybe first 50. I don't really know. Definitely not the earliest. We had people who were streaming Go well before PvP was a thing. People would walk around with their phones and catch, and that was quite common. But I started streaming. I enjoyed it. Because I had played video games for so much of my like childhood. I had watched so much content of others. It had been like a far-fetched dream of mine as a kid to be like a content creator and make content. And Pokemon name not intended there, pun name there not intended. Anyways, and I feel like I was presented with this opportunity to actually like chase it a little bit, to be like, hey, there's this game that you like, there's a community that's growing, it would be a fine opportunity for you to try out streaming, see if you like it, see uh, you know if it works for you. And I did, and I really enjoyed it for a long time. I streamed probably for about a year and a half quite consistently. Just doing playing my sets on stream, battling, and also like forging a lot of friendships. So some of my closest friends, I had mentioned one of them already, Charles. We met through streaming. Another close friend of mine, Wholesome. We actually started doing this Friday series called Flat Friends Friday, and we would just do we would maybe do some like Pokemon Go content. Sometimes we would do what we would call a quad stream, and we would have 4 games going at the same time, and it was just utter chaos. And that was a lot of fun. We'd typically just like be talking over each other, like trying to making it as silly as possible. We'd play other games like there's a Squid Game variant. I forget what it's called off the top of my head, but we'd play that. We'd play Golf with Your Friends, which is like you're a golf ball and you like click and drag to shoot the golf balls, but you can like hit each other, and it's a ton of fun. There's like a spooky game that we played called Devour, and that's one of like the most famous clips from his stream. And like it's like a semi-serious game, but Charles like walks down the stairs, and then the 3 of us are like all using emotes, and our characters are just like waving our arms up and down, and it looks super silly. And that probably went on for a good portion of that year and a half that I streamed consistently. Maybe for like a year or so. Genshin Impact, that was another game that we played a lot together. And that was a ton of fun. And it kind of let me set down other roots into the community in different ways. Like I was like maybe sort of well known for my work as a judge, if in the grassroots community, but like being a streamer, and I'm gonna give myself air quotes there. I was never huge, which is totally fine. And I also I didn't do it as long as some other people. Having friends, hanging out with friends in the Go community, and like knowing people through their communities as well, was definitely a great stepping stool for me to have myself be like maybe a little more known. And one of the friends that I ended up making through acquaintances is a guy named Arrow. He's a well-known competitive player in the Go scene, and he hosted his own draft series for Pokemon Go called Arrow Draft League, and he would frequently stream that, and he would have people shoutcast commentate over the battles as they were happening for like the grand finals, and over recordings for week to week. And that was, I think, my first experience into shoutcasting, and I think that's kind of where I got noticed and picked up by the Pokemon Company. And I'm very grateful for having opportunities from like people in the community saying like, hey, do you want to come on the stream? Like, hey, do you want to shoutcast this local tournament that we have? There were a handful of opportunities that I made sure to say yes to, because like, one, I love the community. I want to make sure that the community is growing and flourishing. And 2, I enjoy talking about the game. I enjoy sharing my knowledge. I'm a color caster, right? So I'm the analyst of the 2 behind the desk, or depending on who I'm paired with. sometimes we're both a little more analytical. And like I really enjoy sharing that knowledge, and kind of goes back to like grad school. I really enjoyed TAing and like sharing knowledge in that way. So I see like in a sense some connections there between like why I like casting. I mean, it's always also fun to dress up in suits, be proper, and like that aspect of it I also find fun. So my very first event was 2022. I worked Vancouver with my good friend Jim. We were casting it together, and that was a ton of fun. I was super nervous. It was the second event of Go in the scene. I wanted to participate in Indianapolis, so I didn't end up casting Indianapolis, but I did fairly well. I actually lost to its accent in the group losers finals, and then I lost to someone who I actually knocked down to the losers bracket afterwards, but like that's okay. You know, sometimes you make it far and then you lose twice in a row and you're out, and that's double elimination. But it's Axon. I don't know if you know Charlie, but he's our current world champ.
I do know that from the spotlight that we see sometimes on the official streams
yes.
about his Axon.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. I think that's like a memory that I'll hold on to for a while. Like losing to the what now is our current world champ, and he's a great guy, right? So not a bad person to lose to. But Vancouver was a ton of fun. I loved the heck out of the event. I did Milwaukee as well. And those were the 3 events that we had besides NAIC and Worlds that year, at least in North America. And I honestly, I think one of my favorite aspects of casting, and it's funny that I'm on a video game casters podcast for this, but I enjoy also meeting the other casters and like becoming friends with them. I live in Boston, so like Rosemary and Gabby are both Boston locals as well. So like we hang out outside of we sometimes hang outside of Pokemon events. We very frequently hang out for Pokemon events, but actually the other weekend I had gone to a concert with Rosemary and her fiance, and that was a ton of fun. So like having these friendships kind of evolve from so many different aspects of Pokemon Go, whether it be like judging in my local scene back in Minneapolis, or like tying it into like starting up streaming with my close friends, Charles, Wholesome, Jim, and Inadequance or Martine. Like, I think like I got like really super cheesy on one of the streams this year. I think it was Knoxville probably. I was like, yeah, Pokemon is all about the community. And in a lot of ways it is. Like you meet so many people, you forge friendships, and that's probably, I think, my favorite part of casting and of just being in the Pokemon community in general.
Yeah, for sure. And it's very appropriate for this podcast as well, which aims to do exactly that, just bring people from across the games and beyond together in the game that we all enjoy. And even though, I'm not a Go player or a TCG player, just the fact that it's all Pokemon, we can all share to some extent in that,
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's... you mentioned your friend Wholesome there, and that's an incredibly wholesome point to ask you what the 5th Pokemon is going to be joining your team. So far we've got Gengar, Umbreon, Manaphy, and Ampharos, who's going to be number 5.
So, one of the Pokemon on my team is going to be Blaziken. So, the reason for Blaziken is because one of the things I'm famous for as a streamer is the Triple Fire Team, which, so for Pokemon Go, in the Go Battle League, which is our online format, you bring 3 Pokemon blind into each battle. And this leads to weird team compositions, sometimes having advantages that you might not expect. So it was most prolific, it was most prominent, it was most powerful, lots of P words there, in a meta that was dominated by Walrein and Trevenant. And these are two Pokemon that are a bit weak to fire. Walrein's moveset is ice and ground, so Powder Snow, Icicle Spear, and Earthquake. And Earthquake hits fires for super effective, but ice is resisted. And Trevenant, of course, being a grass type, takes super effective damage from fire. So I built a team that was Charizard lead, Typhlosion, and Blaziken, and it was 3 fire type Pokemon, and I would very frequently beat water types. Reason being is that the water type of choice in Ultra League is Swampert, and Swampert takes neutral from Blaziken's fighting fast attack, and it takes neutral from Charizard's flying fast attack, and Blast Burn, which is funny. I find it so funny that Blast Burn isn't a move that's used frequently in the video game. It's its signature move, or the starter signature move. Blast Burn is super powerful as a charged attack in Pokemon Go, and it is resisted only singly, because ground doesn't resist fire. It's something that, like, I feel like people need to remind themselves of frequently. Ground's super effective against fire, but it does not resist fire. It still does like 50% of Swampert's health. So Charizard can survive a Hydro Cannon because the fast attacks from Swampert are ground type. They're Mud Shot, so they are singly resisted by the Charizard, so they don't do a lot of damage. And Hydro Cannon does not quite pick up a one-hit knockout. So you're able to put in a lot of fast attack pressure with wing attack, do a lot of damage with a Blast Burn. They typically no shield because, you know, it's resisted damage. Like, why would you want to shield a resisted charge attack? And then you put yourself in where Blaziken, which is a little frail, can use its fast attack counter, which is one of the best fast attacks in Go, to farm down the Swampert, come out with a lot of energy. And if there's a Walrein or a Trevenant in the back, Walrein's taking super effective from counter and taking neutral from Blast Burn. Trevenant gets one shot by everything that Blaziken can throw at it in terms of fire damage. So it was a very potent team composition, and it was a lot of fun, and I had great success with it. So Legend is the highest rank in the Go Battle League for Pokemon Go, and I reached Legend 2 or 3 times with that team.
Wow.
And that's strange because you wouldn't expect a mono-type team to perform super well. It doesn't have as great coverage as you would expect a good team to have, but because of the way that Go Battle League works, and because of the potency of fire types are extremely offensive. So it worked. If you do more damage than your opponent does, then you win the game.
Yeah, there are often fire types on teams in VG, and by fire types, I mean Incineroar.
Oh, true. I guess I'm thinking more of like Talonflame.
Yeah,
Talonflame's
sure.
a pretty offensive. I guess it also has like setup,
Yeah,
with Tailwind.
in some
Incineroar, not actually all that offensive.
well, yeah, it still packs a punch. Talonflame lower power formats. Yeah, Talonflame puts in work. And of course, there are plenty more fire types, but yeah, Incineroar is always a very popular option. A coincidence that those 3 on your team are also the fire first partner Pokemon from generations 1 to 3. But it's just really interesting that it just so happens that it falls as Charizard, Typhlosion, and Blaziken in the first 3 generation. And what a sort of fairy tale team that you were able to create for yourself there. That's really interesting. Monotype team that you did so well with. So, Blaziken, welcome to the team. And before we find out what your final Dream Team member is, we'll go up to more recent times, I suppose. So after grad school, I'm sure it was cool as well. Moving to Boston and continuing to talk about casting.
Yeah, so we already covered the first year of casting, but it was actually after NAIC of 2022 that I moved to Boston. I didn't work as a caster at NAIC. I actually worked as a judge. I was, I think, the first person in Go to do the trifecta or cast, play, and judge. Not that those are the only roles, but Those are probably maybe the
a
most
trifecta.
common roles.
A trifecta.
Yeah. One of the many trifectas that exist in this life. And after NAIC, actually before NAIC, I had a job locked up in Boston. But after NAIC, got myself a car, packed up a U-Haul, drove out to Boston with my mom. She helped me move in. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate you. Love you. And I had a friend in Boston as well. I haven't mentioned her yet, but her name's Anna. She's great. She plays Pokemon Go. She's quite talented at the video game. She was not necessarily the reason I moved out here, but like having a friend in a big city that you're moving to is, I feel like, really key to feeling like you belong there. I didn't know Rosemary, and actually Rosemary wasn't even in Boston at that point in time, but I didn't know Gabby as well. I didn't know Rosemary as well because like I'd known them for like 2 events, right? I hadn't actually had time to build a friendship with them. So having a friend here who she works in biotech as well, so like similar work areas, definitely was great to have a friend in a big city like Boston. It's the biggest city I've ever lived in. You know, I grew up in suburbs of Detroit, did my undergrad in upstate New York, which is a tiny city. I went to Minneapolis, which is a city, but it's like small city. And then Boston is one of the biggest cities on the East Coast. It's no New York City, which I'm thankful for. I actually don't think I'd be as happy in New York as I am in Boston because it's like the city of the US, right? It's like pavement and skyscrapers everywhere, so you can't get out of it. And I like having the ability to like get out of the city a little bit. And yeah, moving here was great. Started my work at Vertex, and that also included trying to figure out how I'm going to balance working a 9 to 5 and casting at the same time, because it's actually really interesting to me the number of commentators that we have that do content full time. There's like a handful in each and every game. And there's also a handful in each and every game that have 9 to 5s outside of doing content. And like kind of working through that balance and like seeing how other people deal with having that balance is really interesting to me. For me, balancing travel to events, travel to family has been a lot of what I have been focusing on lately. You know, NAIC coming up was going to be a blast. I'm really looking forward to New Orleans. It's gonna be my first time in the city.
That's interesting to get your path through the various sizes of towns and cities, etc., that you've lived in. And yeah, by the time this episode goes out, NAIC will be done and dusted. So we'll have to see how that went and how your experience was. But now, time for the experience of completing your dream team. So again, we've got some good diverse typings going on. So far, it's Gengar and Umbreon, Manaphy, Ampharos, and Blaziken. So who's going to be number 6?
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to double up on a type. I didn't plan it out that well. But this is a Pokemon I've talked a lot about in the Go format, and I think it's also kind of cute. It's a Pokemon that I thought would be a really great core breaker to Shadow Swampert, Shadow Alolan Ninetales, which is a very dominant core in Pokemon Go for 4 or 5 months. And that is Politoed. It is a pure water type, so it resists the water attacks from Swampert. It resists the ice attacks from the Alolan Ninetales, and it has Weather Ball, which is an incredibly spammy move in Pokemon Go.
Politoed, great. Another very happy Pokemon like Manaphy. And yeah, it's okay. So type-wise, yeah, you're doubling up with Manaphy there. But in terms of the color of your team, a bit of green and yellow, a bit of splash of that doesn't go amiss.
And
green
the shiny is like a really bright blue, which I like a lot too.
Yeah, true. Yeah, very good point. Also, you're a master of building the suspense. Though you left the reveal of the naming of the Pokemon till the very last moment there, which I really enjoyed. I was on tenterhooks. So Politoed joins the team there as well. Would you say was Politoed something that you sort of came up with quite independently, or would you say, or were you one of the first to hit upon it, or was Politoed growing in popularity at that time?
So I was the only one talking about it.
Okay.
I definitely came up with it independently, and it was kind of a flop, which is funny. It didn't perform super well at the tournament that I brought it to. But I liked the idea, and like I like it. I really love its like little antenna that it's got. It's like curly Q.
Yeah.
So again, it's like a little bit of a balance between meta capabilities, design, and just the vibe of the Pokemon.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. Like Politoed has a great vibe to it.
It's definitely a good vibe, and I think generally your team does as well. So we got Gengar, we got Umbreon, we got Manaphy, we got Ampharos, we got Blaziken, and we got Politoed. There are quite a few happy Pokemon on that team, I would say. Some of the happiness maybe comes from mischief, especially with those Gengar and Umbreon. But now I'm going to ask you, if you had to choose one of these Pokemon to be your partner Pokemon, which would it be?
It's interesting listening to other people's takes on what their partner Pokemon should be, because like I think people were like, oh, I want a Pokemon that can like ride on my shoulder, and I think you had mentioned like, oh, you could ride the Pokemon yourself. I don't think I could do either of those things with my Pokemon. I think we'd have to walk side by side, because my Pokemon's it has to be Gengar. It's my favorite Pokemon. My like stream layout has like a Gengar on it. I feel like I just don't have any other choices. If I had a second, it would be Umbreon, because like Umbreon theoretically you could ride on. Maybe it'd be a little bit weird, because like I feel like the size dimensions, like Umbreon's a little too small. Like
I think it would be like
Arcanine.
It'd be like riding on a dog, I think.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think that's fine. You can walk side by side with Gengar. And yeah, I thought it might be Gengar. That's the Pokemon that you called out right at the very beginning as your favorite. So very good. So Gengar will be your partner Pokemon there. And now I want to know, if you were a Pokemon, what do you think you'd be?
So I dreaded this question because, like I had said before, like this is actually exactly what I should have mentioned when I was talking about like, oh, it's great to have like something that really draws you to an element, because like me having the crystal structure with titanium allows me to have a favorite. I have nothing that's really pushing my guess here of like what Pokemon I am. I had a couple of ideas. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, but like I was really digging into psychic types because I'm like analytical, I'm a scientist, I'm nerdy. I don't know if psychic types are nerdy. I have fondness towards middle stages of evolution. So the first one on my list is Kadabra. The second is Gallade. And I feel like Gallade's just like maybe too obvious. I don't know.
Gallade is psychic and fighting.
And that's the second typing there is like, I don't feel like I'm a fighting type.
No, sure. Maybe not Gallade. I can see the connection to it based on what you said earlier, but maybe not Gallade. I think more Kadabra. I think even then, and I can see why you lent into the psychic thing, the fact that you work with elements, the more science sort of crystal element of it has to come in somewhere. I think, you could be a Carbink, you could be a Rock Fairy, you could be, let's think about this.
If I was a larger guy, I could be a Garganackle.
Yeah, I like that.
Not quite large enough, I feel like, to be a Garganackle. What's the middle stage evolution of that?
Knuckle Stack.
Knuckle stack. It could be a knuckle stack.
You can be a knuckle stack. Yeah, I like it. I like. I don't know. I feel like you're not a rock type though. That's the thing. Which okay. So if we're going with psychic rock, then you could be soul rock or lunatone. I could see that.
I feel like I'd be more Lunatone than Soul Rock.
Yeah, I can see that. Interesting. So let's say lunatone then. For now, you
All
are a
right.
floating moon. Of course.
Exactly.
That's the vibe I always get from you. What do you think? Drop a comment. Let us know whether you think we're completely off the mark there or not. Nick, especially, and I would love to know what Pokemon you think Nick would suit based on everything we've heard of Nick so far. And speaking of getting all of you involved, time for your community questions. So, as always, I posted on X to ask for questions from the community for Nick. Thank you very much for suggesting them. And I apologize as ever if I mispronounce your names or handles. So, let's kick things off with the Diff TCG. Would you rather spend 1,000 years playing Go or 1,000 years playing RuneScape?
That is a tough question.
That noise is exactly what I thought your initial response would be.
No hate to Go, but it doesn't have as expansive of a game style as RuneScape. So if I'm going to answer this question, it's probably RuneScape. You know, Pokemon's actually done a pretty good job in the past 4 years of adding new ways to interact with the game, whether that be like routes or Mega Pokemon or party play. I'm not a walking ad for Pokemon Go, I swear.
It's a difficult decision to make. Okay, well, there you go. Thank you, the Diff TCG. Now, Brown Baller 10, favorite RuneScape quest?
That's a great question. I was afraid you were going to pick up one of the questions from Inadequates because he asked one of his questions is like favorite member, and I'm like, I don't want to try to figure that out. That's a good one. So, backstory is I am known amongst my friend group. It's like we have a number of memes, like all friend groups do. One of them is they call me the lore guy because during one of our co-streams we played some RuneScape, and my friend Charles was like asking me to kill time as we were getting set up, and he was like, "Oh, explain what's going on here." And instead of like explaining the raid itself, I explained the story of why the raid exists in the game within the lore of the game. So they call me lore guy. So I think that's probably why Bromballer's asking this question, because he knows that I like the lore of the game. And it's true. RuneScape has a lot of depth in the lore. I enjoy it a lot. So that means I think one of the quests that I would have to pick is not yet in the game, but it's going to be soon. It's While Gothic Sleeps. It should be coming out this summer, I think, which is very exciting. The reason that it's not in the game yet, but I know about it, is because so old school RuneScape is a reborn version of RuneScape that they took like a time slice of, and then they started redeveloping the game from there because there were some changes in original RuneScape, otherwise known as RuneScape 3 now, that some people didn't like, and they just got rid of those in this new game developed. So there are like 2 games being developed in parallel now. It's kind of interesting.
I see. A new quest coming out this summer, so you haven't played it yet.
But I haven't played it in the revamped game.
Oh, I see.
Played it in the old game. So
got it.
Yeah, a little bit of explanation to make my answer make sense.
Yeah. No, I see. Very nice. Well, excited for you to experience that again this summer. There you go. Thank you, Brown Baller 10. Thank you for your questions there. If you want to submit a question for a future guest on Chazingdra Chats, then keep an eye on my X at Chazingdra, where I post out the callouts for questions. So, Nick, we've heard a lot about your story up to now, but what's next for you?
Well, NAIC. NAIC is definitely next. And then, I'm a little disappointed in my competitive season this year. I, of course, only had 2 tournaments that I actually participated in, EUIC and Pittsburgh, the very first NA regional. And I did not get championship points from either of them. So I would really love to qualify for Worlds next season. I think that's kind of what's up for me.
I see. Okay, yeah.
Putting it out there.
Yeah.
Doing
it. Yeah. You heard it here first. We'll have to see how your next season goes. And finally, looking back from now, as a Pokemon Go caster, someone who's achieved that trifecta of Jar Jam player as well, back to the young Nick who's playing blue, loved yellow. What advice would you give to that young you?
I think maybe not play video games quite as much as you did, but I mean, I think I turned out fine. I think I turned out great. But maybe even, I don't know, continue playing the Pokemon games, because they're like, I think as a kid, without understanding like any competitiveness within the games, it was hard for me to stick through like different generations. But sticking with it would have made, the transition for Go a little bit easier, for relearning Pokemon's names and like relearning everything about it. And then, I don't know, just make sure to treasure your friends along the way. I think that's like a lesson that a lot of people learn at some point in their life. I think in a lot of ways, people always are continuing to learn it in different ways, with each friend that they have, and like each different aspect of friendships that they have. And, it's important to make sure that you are aware of the importance of those friendships.
Especially in a game like Pokemon, where the community aspect for the competitive scene is so important. And you are the first guest I've ever had whose advice to the younger self would be play more Pokemon. And I love that. So thank you very much indeed, Nick. The chat doesn't end there. If you want to hear 15 or so more minutes of bonus questions with Nick in his Rapidash round, quickfire questions that he hasn't prepared for in any way, such as, why is his name AlphaFeeb? Things like that, then you can hop on over to Patreon and tune into the Rapidash round there. Of course, only if you're in a position to be able to do that. I very much appreciate the fact that you have watched this episode as well, and I hope you've enjoyed it. We often discover in the Rapidash round that we've barely scratched the surface of the guests that we've had on, so looking forward to diving a little bit deeper with Nick there. And Nick, thanks so much for coming on to Chazingdra Chats. It's been fascinating to hear your life story and have a bit of a science lesson as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a blast to get to talk about so many different things.
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed talking to you. And where can people find you online?
So most frequently, twitch.tv/Pokemon Go. It's where I go live the most. But also twitter.com/AlphaFeeb as well. I post fairly infrequently, but I'm still there.
Yeah, make sure you go and check out Nick online. And if you've enjoyed the show, then make sure you do like, subscribe, all that jazz on YouTube. Drop a comment. Nick's given us a lot of food for thought, so I'd love to know what you think and what your own dream team of 6 Pokemon would be. All of those things really do go a long way when you're creating, so please go and do that. The podcast is also obviously available on the audio app, Spotify, Apple, etc. So leave a rating and review. Those really help as well. I mentioned my X profile, Chazingdra. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, Chazingdra. You can follow the podcast specifically, Chazingdra Chats on X2. And of course, the YouTube channel, if you're not watching on YouTube currently, is Chazingdra too. So that's a whole lot of Chazingdra goodness to get involved in, as well as the Discord community. It would be a pleasure to welcome you there. Everything will be linked in the description. Episodes for future guests will drop every Wednesday. Any suggestions for future guests, you can email me on chazingdra@gmail.com or get in touch via any of the socials I've mentioned. Also, any feedback you have on the podcast. All right, that's the small print out of the way. You can tell that's well-oiled patter of small print there. It's time for your Rapidash round. So if you're not joining us over on Patreon for that, then it's goodbye from Nick.
See y'all later.
And it's goodbye from me. See you next time on Chazingdra Chats, where there'll be another 6 Pokemon, 1 life story. All right, Nick, how are you feeling about these bonus questions?
So you say I didn't prepare.